Okay, so hard work does not work. Hard work does not work. I'll say it a third time. Hard work does not work. Right? Now, throughout our lives in this thing we call life, there's quite a few diatribes and, you know, uh sayings and verbiages that get thrown at us and onto us so that we can it's really to assuage our emotions or what the internet gets called copium, right? And so basically the inspiration behind me saying this and just saying it flat out is, I'm kind of the mind that there's too many things that we can see in front of our faces or, at the very least through our phone screen, maybe more so, that kind of spits directly in the face of that whole idea that hard work pays off, right? And, it's something that more so became a thing, I'm pretty sure, after the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? Because, you know, they had to get people are already doing hard work, right? Like, living agriculturally and living off their farmland and stuff like that. Like, more people definitely lived rural agricultural lives than they did once the Industrial Revolution started, right? So, it needs to be basically for people to continue doing certain things. You need to have certain ideas thrown out there, right? Like, something that kind of comes to mind is like, how, a lot of the this is a iffy ground here, but the benefits of, say, marriage get leaned a lot more towards the favor of women. So that's why you have certain diatribes such as happy wife, happy life, right? So that, even guys who end up in the worst kinds of marriages that they can, tell themselves that kind of diatribe and cope with the situation. That's not to say that's every marriage, that's not what I'm saying. But, I mean, if we look at the marriage statistics and the divorce rate, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day, right? But, there the interesting thing about that is that there are a couple of reasons why hard work does not work, right? So the first one would probably be hard work without direction, right? Like if you're working hard at the wrong thing, right? Like you could have there's people who worked very hard in school. They worked their behind off and got plenty of degrees, right? And they'll get a decent job. Maybe that pays them around somewhere around $5,000 to $6,000 per month, right? Then you have people who you know work hard at making ASMR videos on YouTube where they're just where they just order food and eat it, and some of those people make 15,000 and 20,000 a month, right? So, and that's not to say that the college person was working hard in the wrong direction, but you could say even compare that to somebody who works hard at, say, being a shoe shiner, or somebody who works hard at being a plumber, right? But yet you have people who work hard or barely work at certain things that you know that pay a lot more, right? Because basically outright, and there are things that aren't half as hard as doing things like plumbing or HVAC work, right? Or working on an oil rig. There are things that aren't half as hard that people do and make the same money that people do doing those things, right? And then I guess the second reason would be, that leverage is actually what's more important, right? Because let's say the example of something like an oil rig, the guys working the rig, even though from what I hear, guys that work oil rigs, they make like 150,000, sometimes 200,000 a year, like they make good money, right? But who's signing their check, right? And is the person signing their check on the oil rig with them, right? Just things to think about, right? So, granted, when you have leverage, though, I guess you could say that you kind of have the harder work of, having to make sure you make the right like four decisions per year for your business and what you own. But the bottom line is it like, is it hard work that pays off, or is it gaining leverage that pays off, right? So, and then also you have burnout and diminishing returns. There are people who spend day and night working on something like a YouTube channel, or they're working on trying to be some kind of like musician or rapper or something like that, and it just doesn't work out for them, right? No matter how hard they work. And I think that's the thing that becomes disheartening for people, especially in this day and age with social media and all that, because you have people who are very talented at a particular thing, and they see somebody at social media who just for some reason, either their parent is either for some kind of like nepotism reason, like their parent is in the company or their parent is in the business or something, but they see people who have way more popularity and make way more money than them, right? Despite all their efforts, right? So that's the kind of thing that makes me think that hard work does not pay off. Like I know people who do music who have hundreds of music videos and nobody cares, right? They go and they perform at every local spot they can and nobody cares, right? Then you'll have some rapper who from the same area actually who who will get on TikTok and spit their little raps and stuff like that. They don't spend half the money. They don't spend on half the attention. All they got is their phone and their raps. They don't even have time to go and do shows and stuff like that. And those people get farther than the person who is working harder, right? So maybe and granted, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that people should be like slackers or be lazy, right? And hard work is definitely required, right? Like as I mentioned, jobs like like oil rigs, without oil rig workers, the world would collapse, right? Without HVAC workers, right, people would go crazy without their AC working and all that, right? Or having to fix it themselves, right? So hard work is necessary. You have people who, they paint the roads, the street cleaners and all that kind of stuff, right? So there is necessity for hard work. But as I said, the saying hard work pays off usually is what they call copium that's given to the kinds of people who work those jobs so that they can at least keep the idea in their back of their mind like, yeah, I may see like rappers and basketball players and all that throwing money all over the place, but the hard work I do, it matters, right? Which truthfully it does, right? But if the fifth best guy on the Warriors, dies tonight, the Warriors have a problem, right? And people are gonna mourn his loss and talk about him all over the place. If some HVAC guy electrocutes himself by accident and dies, the next time that person needs AC, they're just gonna call the next person and just warn them that some other guy died trying to fix their AC before, right? So there's certain things that we need to kind of look at in that fashion, right? So, and as I said, what actually works for people is leverage, and working hard in the right direction, right? Building a system, right? Because let's say even you have somebody that works HVAC. Let's say you have two guys that work HVAC, right? You have one that just goes day in, day out. He works as hard as he can. Then you have another one who decides that, like, he's gonna get all his cousins into HVAC. He's gonna start a company. He's gonna be the director of the company. Then they're gonna expand, right? That guy is, despite the fact that they're both doing HVAC, one is just working hard at being an HVAC worker, the other one's working hard at being an HVAC businessman, right? So it's the same thing everywhere you go. Even in the music industry, you have artists who are supremely talented, but they sign a record deal that's like a $10 million contract with a $5 million advance, which is money that they have to pay back. It's basically a loan, right? And their masters are completely owned by the record label, so they're not really making money like that, and they're kind of working in a deficit. For every $50,000 they make, they have $40,000 of payments, right? So and then you have people who are much, much, much less talented than them, right? Who signed 5, 10, maybe 20 artists, and they just sit back and they collect money from all those artists working, right? So systems are, in a certain sense, better and bigger than willpower, right? And so, hard work, it tends to deplete your energy, right? Hard work takes away sleep from people. And yet again, like I'm saying, I'm not saying for people not to work hard, right? But the bottom line that I'm getting at is hard work does not work, right? Not by itself. But smart, directed, leveraged hard work, now that is what's unstoppable. That is what works, right? So, I don't expect everybody to try and be businessmen and business people, right? Even though increasingly the world seems to be getting to that point to where everybody needs to figure out something that they could do, something they could put together, right? Because right now we're at a point in time where, particularly I think to people who are like ages 40 and under, it's becoming increasingly clear that hard work is not enough, that hard work alone is not going to cut it, right? And sometimes I think we need to accept that there are certain things that are fed to us for us just to cope and, to swallow the hard pill of life and keep moving forward, right? But, realistic teaching needs to happen, and I do think there needs to be a restructuring of the school system and how it works, which is probably something I should talk about, because that's a whole topic I can get into for like an hour. But that's basically the main point of what I'm getting at, right? That hard work does not work, smart work does, leverage work does, right? And you need to decide which one is better for you. Everybody's not designed to be bosses. Everybody's not designed for the road of entrepreneurship. Everybody does not have the strong mind for it. There is stability that comes with the hardworking jobs. There's stability that comes with a clear, regular road, right? Where as far as the path to gaining leverage, the path to building a system, that's a lot more nuanced. That's a lot more difficult. Has a lot more zigzags and surprise turns on the road and breakdowns and all that, right? So it's understandable, right? But I think with all that in mind, we need to be careful with telling people hard work pays off. And we also need to realistically understand that hard work does not.